Welcome to Conversations with Tony Mobley. Today, Conversation with Tony Mobley is both simulcast on YouTube and LinkedIn Live. Welcome radio listeners from Cincinnati, Ohio on Z98. You can hear us on the radio by going to z98fm.com. And on Conversation with Tony Mobley today, I am talking to creator, storyteller, the founder of Revere XR, Miss Yolanda Barton. This is episode 91 of Conversations with Tony Mobley. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of the journey. I want to thank the team behind Conversation with Tony Mobley for all of their hard work. You can go to conversationwithtonymobley.com and you can participate in our conversation today. How can you do that? By registering at conversationwithtonymobley.com. There you will see an interactive chat. That's right, it's called Mukana. And you can put in your questions. Not only can you put in your question, those questions can be voted up and down by simply going to conversationswithtonymobley.com. And so we encourage you to do that. You can also ask your questions in the YouTube chat. Thank you so much for being here. And now we're going to talk with our guest for today, Ms. Yolanda Barton, CEO of XR Revere, or Revere XR, I should say. And so we're so happy to have you. And the very first question is always on Conversation with Tony Mobley. Who are you? So who is Yolanda Barton?
I love that question. I would say I'm a storyteller. I'm a teacher for those who want to learn. I'm a listener for those who have stories to share. I am daring. I am innovative. I live off inspiration and am finding ways to inspire those through innovation and tech. In some respects, I would say I'm my ancestors' wildest dream. I recognize the footprints that came before me to get me where I am today. I am who I am because of what others contributed long before I got here. And I'm very grounded in the past and wanting to bridge the past and the future so that we are always staying grounded in the memory of what took place and who we are, and allow that to shape and inspire the future and what it's going to look like. But the hat that I wear and am most excited about is the founder of Revere XR, and being an immersive storyteller. But of course, in my personal life, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, a daughter, a friend, and so much more. But I am the sum of my ancestors' wildest dreams, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for being here again today. And I am looking forward to our conversation today. So thank you so much for sharing the things that you've shared. So how did you get started in technology? What was that like?
Well, I'll say I'm a non-developer. I'm a non-tech founder. And originally that wasn't even my goal. It wasn't about tech. It was about solving a dilemma in my own community. My neighborhood got gentrified and erased. And it was something that I just couldn't sit with because the music history and the culture and heritage in that space gave birth to world-renowned musicians like Jimi Hendrix and Quincy Jones and even Ray Charles and so many others. So I felt a profound obligation to make sure that I could preserve the history and stories that took place in my neighborhood well after they had been erased. And I used a couple years in graduate schools, just figuring out what are different solutions. And, you know, I would say the aha moment was realizing that two things that don't typically go together and don't traditionally go together, often if we can find a way to merge those things, we can create something innovative. And I put on a VR headset and my life changed, right? And it wasn't the game that I was playing. It was the opportunity to be immersed in an environment and to be able to simulate an environment turned into a miraculous solution for the very dilemma I was trying to solve. And how is it that we preserve our stories into the future? And so I found that immersive technology, VR, AR, XR, is an amazing way to recreate history and make it accessible. And that's how I came across my solution, and finding that technology really could preserve the past so we can recreate it, we can relive it, we can share it with others, we can interact with it. And that doesn't mean it's to replace books. You know, books is still important, but we have an opportunity to do more than read about history, and we can experience it and interact with it. And that felt like the perfect solution.
Amazing. Could you talk a little bit more about your hometown that was I was going to use the word attacked, but compromised. Let's
Mm-hmm.
use that word.
So I'm born and raised in Seattle, Washington. And most people, when they hear Seattle, they think Microsoft, they think Starbucks, Amazon, Boeing, and all of those are amazing companies in our city. But there's also something really profound about the fact that Jimi Hendrix was born in my neighborhood and launched his career there, that Quincy Jones was raised and learned music theory there, that Kurt Cobain was raised there and born as well, that Ernestine Anderson and Ruby Bishop. And honestly, we'd be here for two more podcasts listing all the names of talented individuals that came from my city and specifically my neighborhood. And that's worth preserving. But today, if you went there, you wouldn't necessarily see that in the historic neighborhood, the Central District. You know, for some people, it's the upscaling of a neighborhood. Interesting that we all define gentrification very differently. For some people, it means they get to move to a neighborhood as it's transitioning and dislocating its community, and you're getting a great deal on a house before it's worth a couple more million, right? And that's some people's goal. For us, I think there's nothing wrong with upscaling and advancing communities, but it shouldn't be at the result of dislocating entire groups of people, because we lost community, we lost connection, our stories are vanishing, and we're losing the ability to pass that history down to future generations. And so, how will future generations connect with this legacy? How will we be able to preserve the history when we are no longer in that geographic space? I mean, but another dilemma is there are people living in the very house that Jimi Hendrix was born and raised in, and they don't know it. And I consider that sacred stories and memories and history. And we want that to be accessible. So if I could visit my neighborhood from my living room, that's something I like to do on a regular basis. If I could experience that history and that community, that's something I want future generations to have access to. And if we can learn the history of all cities through this particular tool, then we can offer it to students in school. We can offer it to museums. We can have it in the home for family fun nights. I mean, I think that we all have an amazing opportunity to look at advancing every city and continuing to grow neighborhoods so that they can fit more people. But I think we need to be a lot more aware of how it in fact impacts all groups of people on all sides. And my neighborhood is one that is no longer the home to the amazing community that built it. They have been relocated and disconnected from that community. And this was my way of saying we're still here and we still need the opportunity to connect, even if that geographic space isn't the same.
Have you come up with ways in which to reconnect or bring back those experiences, that culture, that experience through VR?
I have. I've done quite a few things. Like I rebuilt the neighborhood as it was, not as it is. I created markets so that we could house the historic and thriving businesses that are still there, still striving to stay serving community, whether or not we're there, they're still there. We also promoted artists and the amazing murals that they've been creating to house the history and the legacy. So we've got art, we've got culture, we've got history, we've got businesses. Like now you can visit, in my VR experience, you can visit a market of Black businesses and see their products and hear their stories, like what their connection is to the neighborhood and what their products are and how they're serving community. And that expands their reach to a global audience beyond the city that we live in. So I think it's really important for students to be able to plug in. That's what we call it at Revere XR. We want to plug everyone in. It's important for students to plug in and be able to navigate the neighborhood and listen to oral history, something that we're losing connection to. So maybe my generation, I could sit on the porch of elders' homes and listen to their stories. I could carry their groceries home with them and listen to them tell me things that made me feel connected to my history. I'm not saying that's not happening in certain places, but it doesn't seem to be as active as it used to be. In oral tradition for a lot of cultures is what houses our very history. So we are at risk of losing that. So you can travel the neighborhood and hear a 98-year-old storyteller give you a tour of the neighborhood and tell you history that you couldn't find on the internet because it's oral history. And schools can teach history in this way. And you can also experience the music, history, and story of the musicians themselves. Because long before a lot of musicians, whether it's Motown, like before the Jackson 5 were in the studio or on the radio, they were performing in community hubs and venues in their neighborhoods and in communities. And so a lot of musicians and artists, their stories are very much connected to the geographic spaces that they were born and raised in, which means that geographic space is a character in the story. And for my neighborhood, the Central District, to birth and raise and launch careers of musicians that literally shaped music all over the world, that's a special place and it deserves to be preserved. And there's a lot more cities just like it with gems and treasures that need to be preserved.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question about other cities that have embraced what you're doing. I know that you happen to be, I'm going to say, bi-coastal in that you are in Seattle and also a resident of Atlanta.
That's
And
correct.
so, have you brought any of those experiences to some of the richness that is in place in Atlanta?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what's interesting is I'm ready to have a conversation about how future technologies and emerging technologies can really support us. But a lot of communities aren't ready to have that conversation, Tony. And you know why? Because projection mapping or 360 film and more. And so it's really hard to have those conversations and show communities what I can do for them without them having that introduction. So we focus a lot right now on plugging people in. Let's show you the power of this technology and how it's being used currently. And then let's talk about what we can do moving forward with that technology. So I have a goal to really preserve Atlanta's civil rights history, its music history, and really promote its culture and heritage and how it really shows up in a lot of different ways in communities in Atlanta. But we really have to focus on getting people plugged in first. And there is a barrier, there is a gap in exposure. And we know this, that this technology doesn't necessarily live full time in our communities, but we also have to introduce people to it because we have the most to gain. We have an opportunity to take it far beyond anything that they've even done or could think to do with this technology. And they'll never see the true power of this technology until they put it in our hands, Tony. And so I'm starting with that here in Atlanta. Let's put it in your hands. And then I'm really interested in coordinating with the Rice Center and historians and storytellers. Let's start having regular storytelling to collect that history So we can be really focused on how we want to use it in immersive storytelling. But we have to begin by collecting the stories. And the great thing is that Atlanta has a lot of history. We could do this work in Atlanta for the next 10 years and still have plenty of content left over to cover for another 10 after that. It's just really important to document our history, because I think historically we've always looked for other people to tell our stories for us. And that's why some of those stories are mischaracterized, because we've allowed people to dictate what our stories sound like and to approve our history and determine how it wants to be documented. This is an opportunity for us to correct those mischaracterized stories and tell the stories we need to tell and document our history for future generations. And it's essentially a time capsule, right? So that great, great, great grandchildren will know what took place in these spaces, regardless of what they look like.
Amazing. I was thinking as you were talking about that. I grew up in New Jersey, and but my father was from um, Orlando, Florida, and we would take summer trips to um, Orlando. And one of the experiences that I had as a young boy was we had to get to Virginia, and then from Virginia to Florida, we were sort of on our own. And at that time, we were not able to stay in hotels, motels, or anything like that. You know, we slept on the side of the road. You try to find a safe space,
Mhm.
and you would park and you would stay there. And prayerfully, if everything worked out, you'd make it to your destination, and it would be the same thing in the return. And the reason I was thinking about that as you were talking was that's an experience that I have had as a child, and it's not an experience that my children who are in their late 20s can understand or even appreciate.
Mhm.
But it would be something that if it was in a VR space, then they would have that experience, at least in that digital way.
Yeah.
Um, I think we are who we are because of the experiences that we have, and those things that have been good and those things that have been bad. Part of those things that we need to share is those things that, as you said, have not been talked about. So, my question to you is, how do we get it in their hands?
Well, I consider myself boots on the ground, right? I can be in the corporate spaces sharing how this technology can provide amazing opportunities. I can share what I see the future in this technology at, Oculus headquarters. But at the end of the day, we need some of the organizations that develop the technology to be willing to support those of us who are on the ground plugging people in, right? I think there's a lot of misconceptions. Some organizations feel like their headsets are fully affordable, but that's not the case. They're not accessible to all families and communities. A lot of schools are looking for grants to put it in their school system because they want to use it to teach, but then they're unsure of the best content to provide students. It seems like there's a lot of discovery and exploration happening right now. Organizations want to figure out the best way to monetize, schools want to find the best way to involve that innovation in their classrooms, but there's not a lot of thought about just introducing people. And it's a huge priority for Revere XR because we talk about how important it is to not leave anyone behind, right? And they have limitations. Organizations that have been really prominent in the XR community have limitations. They're all reaching a ceiling where they're trying to say, oh my gosh, what's the next thing? Like games has taken us this far. Great. Let's try real estate. Let's try construction. Let's try medical. And sure, there are advancements in all those spaces, but we're all moving past just the introduction. And if we take the time to introduce diverse global communities, new opportunities and new lanes and new uses for this technology will be born and will merge into the space, and we'll find out different ways that this technology can be used. So I look at things like Facebook. When it was originally created, it was created for a single intent. But look at it today. It's so much more than what even the founders intended for it to be. I feel the same way about XR. We've only taken a small step with where this future technology can really go. But we can't afford to leave people behind that can really shape the future of this technology. And we need to inspire future generations. So we need pipelines in our schools. So I have programs that I offer school districts that not only introduce the technology, but also provides opportunities to be a part of a speaker series where you're listening to diverse representatives in this space who look like you, that are building in this space. And then that gives you the representation that you need to see yourself in that future. And we have to introduce schools to design mentality. I have programs where we're going to be working with school districts, helping students not only, like I said, get exposed, but consider what they can build in the future and what that design process looks like. You don't have to wait till grad school to learn that information. We need to be introducing youth to it now. And it's not just youth, it's community too. You know, Atlanta has some really strong community, and so does Seattle. So getting it in front of people in the community to say, great, now you see the technology, you see how I'm using it. What are your ideas? What would you like to bring to the table? How do you see this technology being prevalent in your community, among your small businesses, or in the art community or the music community? It really is going to take a stronger effort, more feet going forward, just to introduce people to this technology. And we can't sit back and say, it's affordable enough, people will get it on their own. That's not true. And you're limiting the reach and the future of this technology if you don't see the value in plugging in community. So while we have created experiences, we have more projects in the pipeline, we're serving schools, we are also saying, if you need the opportunity to get plugged in, let us know, because we can help you with that.
Amazing. Amazing. We have a question from Liberty White of Atlanta, Georgia. As a mother, what do your children think of what you're doing?
I'm so grateful that you asked that. My kids have been involved in every aspect of this process. You know, we are a family business. In fact, for those of you in Atlanta, we'll be at Ponce this Saturday with a booth just plugging people in. So feel free to bring your kids or come by and put that headset on. But I'd say, you know, I started this work in graduate school, right? And my children, I'm a single mother and I have 2 daughters. My children have been a part of every idea that I've had. My youngest, she calls it a beautiful mistake. We built we wanted to promote the businesses in the neighborhood. And then she said, I don't want to just see their logo, Mom. I want to open the door and go into their business. Well, now you can do that. And that was her idea. You know, my other daughter said, there's a lot of artists, amazing artists, Mom. Their art should be in the neighborhood. And now you see that in the experience. I think that young people today really have something that I didn't have, which was so much exposure to virtual worlds and what it means to create space for yourself or represent yourself creatively in these different worlds and through your digital footprint. I mean, these kids have social media, websites. My oldest daughter is building websites. Like, these aren't things that I was doing when I was younger. So their capacity to dream beyond what our vision could be is extremely necessary in this process. Every time I create an updated build or I have an experience that I'm working on, their eyes and ears are in that headset telling me what they think and sharing with me how they feel about it. And going into schools, they've been a part of saying, this is what people need to know in schools, Mom. This is what we need other students to be a part of. And they love plugging in their friends. They always want to take headsets to school to show students and other teachers what's happening in my home and what we're building for the future. And so, you know, my oldest daughter likes to speak. She wants to learn to pitch for Revere XR. So I would say for my children, they're very much involved in this process, and they're learning to be builders and creators in this space. And I support that growth 100%.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Liberty White, for your great question. Uh, how did you how did you get started with your company?
Well, that's a great question. I'm in grad school. Like I said, I started really focusing on how I wanted to use immersive technology to tell our story, the story of the community that I was born and raised in, the Central District. And um, I got a lot of great media attention and some research awards around the stuff that I was doing. We were doing focus design groups in communities. We were putting on events for people to come put on headsets and get introduced. We were putting on storytelling events so elders could come and share their stories and consider how they want to be preserved. So a lot of that work was happening my entire grad school career. And then Oculus invited me to come and speak at their headquarters about the work that I was doing. So I spoke at Oculus headquarters and shared my vision for the future and talked about how important I felt this technology could be in aiding the vanishing of history. And they invited me to Oculus Launchpad. And for those who don't know, Oculus Launchpad is a competition for the future innovators in the VR space. And it's an opportunity to compete. And I'm very fortunate that my experience was chosen and it allowed me to expand it. But as I was expanding it and introducing it to communities for beta testing, I had record labels saying, we need this. I had offices of tourism saying, we want you to build this. I had teachers saying, please help me, you know, present this to school leadership so that we can get it in the classroom. I had so many different industries and people saying to me, I've never seen VR be used in this way because there isn't anything that I like what I've created in the market right now. And, you know, people shared the importance of this work. And I really started to feel like it's more than just a project. It's more than just a preservation project. It's actually a mission. And my mission is to collect all the historic gems and cultural and heritage of different communities that are at risk of being vanished, that are housing important music history and civil rights history, or history in general, storytelling and oral tradition, and make sure that we're preserving it into the future. And I've had the opportunity to do an accelerator through Camelback Ventures, which is for founders of color, that has really helped me shape what a successful model could look like in this space. I don't want to step out of this space. I feel like I've just begun and there's a lot more work to be done. And I know typically with businesses, it's a little bit more based on all of the details, and we're building that now. And we've got great advisors and people who have been really successful in tech helping us build that. But I think everyone I speak to, whether they're an investor or an angel investor or a professor or a consultant or a potential client or consumer, everyone sees the value of this work and sees how important it is and why it needs to happen now. Because I don't think that many other generations after us will have access to the history to be able to recreate it in this way. And I've shared the dilemma that our history is sitting in archives and in clouds. And how is that serving humanity? We need to have access to that history. And if you can't fly to Paris to visit the Louvre or travel to different locations like Egypt to see the pyramids, you know, then it's inaccessible to you. So how do we make history more accessible is really the foundation of what I'm creating. How do we make our past preserved so that we can experience it and interact with it in the future, and that future generations will be inspired to continue to build on that future.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Liberty White is back again, and her question is, what can you tell us about the event taking place on Saturday?
Absolutely. There is an organization that does booths at Ponce, and they've asked me to come and spend this Saturday, just introducing the people to VR because they haven't seen any other space where that's accessible or available to them. So I'll be bringing headsets down and inviting people to come and put the headset on and experience virtual reality. And I might give a sneak peek of some of the work that I'm doing as well. But this is just part of our mission to get people plugged in and give them an opportunity to not be left behind. So just because you don't have a headset at home, it should still be accessible and there should still be opportunities for you to put that headset on. We're looking for more support in buying headsets so we can do larger events and serve larger groups of people. So even if you're not an investor and you want to purchase another headset to give to Revere XR, we can plug in 10 more, 20 more, 100 more people with that kind of support. So we really look forward to putting headsets on people and giving them a chance to be underwater or out in space or use art apps so that they can experience all the different ways that they can be navigating their present and their future through this technology.
I was wondering, have you been able to, or are you connected with Dr. Messina Morris from Morehouse?
She
Or
is a soror. She was one of the first people I met when I moved to Atlanta. And
fantastic.
yeah, she's incredible. What I love is that there is space for us to all be like in this particular industry. And she is serving millions of students through Morehouse and taking Morehouse to heights that they wouldn't know in terms of technology and VR. And I think that what she's doing is incredible. And it's just a testament, right? Her work is just a testament to what could be done. So I love seeing her honored and being giving awards from all these different companies. And I love that she's open and dedicated to making sure that future generations get a chance to see her work and her representation. So I think the work that she's doing incredible. And I love being accompanied by amazing other Black women in this space who are trailblazing and setting trends for the future.
I, I I didn't know for sure, but I wanted to make sure I lifted up her name because it,
Yes.
we she's been on a couple of times with me, and
Oh,
so
nice.
um, I'm so glad that you are connected and you are a Soros. So thank you so much for sharing that. Mr. Albee, who is part of our team, asked a question. He says, "How do you limit the time with tech with children as much as adults need a break from tech?"
Hmm. Yeah. It sounds like you're asking, how do you kind of manage the situation with your kids, first and foremost? Um, so in my household, we have a pledge. It's called a conscious tech pledge. And it's something that we offer at Revere XR too. So if any parents want to sit down with their kids and go through this contract and this pledge, it really identifies that I am an active user of technology, but I'm using it to promote good in my household, in my community, and among others. Because I think tech right now is really about what is the latest and greatest and how can we all kind of race to build the next thing. But there's a lack of morality and values in this space. And I'm not interested in just plugging people in for the fun of that. I want them to see a positive future for themselves. I want them to pick dilemmas in their community and solve those with this technology. But we also have to be willing to sort of have an oath for what it means to be a conscious, positive user in technology. So with my children, they are not killing zombies in headsets. In my household, that's not something that's going to promote them being a positive user in tech. They're aware that that exists, but we focus on immersive documentaries. We focus on them traveling in orbit space. We focus on taking a rocket launch into the moon. We focus on them learning in underwater worlds. You know, it takes an active intention to be a conscious tech leader. And we're not just here to play games. We're here to create something that can last, you know, well into the future and keep people excited about what it means to use positive tech in a way that it enhances our human story, right? And so it's not enough to just turn it on and play everything. We need to be taking the time to have conversations about what's going to serve our youth well, what's going to serve us well. And we need to move past the idea that this is just for kids. Like when your kids go to sleep, you should be able to plug in and have some time for yourself, maybe through meditation apps, maybe through music, eventually through some of our experiences. You'll want to relive history and experience music history. And that gives adults an opportunity, and elders and grandparents the opportunity to be excited about what's coming in the future as well. Because I meet a lot of parents right now who say, Yolanda, I bought this headset for my daughter or my granddaughter for Christmas, and they don't play it at all. Right. And that's because that family or that youth hasn't found what resonates with them in the space yet. And then you have people saying, I bought it for my kid and all they do is play games and I can't get them to take it off. Well, that's why you need that oath, so that they're constantly having to think about what is it that is promoting positive conscious tech in the space that I'm in? How much time should I be using it? What are the boundaries that need to be set? And I think that's a conversation that tech is incredibly ready for, whether they're resistant or not. We need to start talking about boundaries. We need to start talking about values, because who knows where tech is going to go if we kind of just leave it in open space for people to continue building without thinking about how it affects humanity and what it means to enhance our human stories. So I'm happy to work with parents and elders around creating that in their household and really understanding like how much time, what experiences, and how we want to operate this technology in a safe and productive way.
I was wondering, is the oath on your website?
No, not at this time, but it is something that I can share with people.
Okay. And the website is Revere,
www. Yep, reverexr.com. That's correct.
reverexr.com.
Yes.
And we have another question from Liberty White. For anyone watching and wanting to get into this space, where should they begin? What are the starters, mid, and high levels of headsets?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, that's the thing, is that new headsets are coming out regularly because I think people are still competing to find out what the best tools are. There's HTC Vives, there's Oculus Quest 1, Quest 2, the new Meta Quest Pro, another Quest 3 coming out soon. There's such a variety of tools, and all of them do something a little different. You know, for households that are just looking to kind of get more engaged and maybe can't afford the headset, there's a lot of web XR that you can find on the internet just to kind of get in the opportunity to play. I say everybody needs an opportunity to plug in, but I also think it's really important that we stop feeling like we have to wait to see what everyone else is doing. This space is open. That's what I can say. This space is wide open, and it needs your ideas, and it needs your perspective, and it needs your sense of inclusion. Where do you come from, and what do you have to offer? I'd say if you're interested and you want to get plugged in, reach out to me at Revere XR, join my website, subscribe, and I'll be sending out a lot of updates and different experiences that kind of introduce people. But it's really important to be, I think, this is one space where I feel very unapologetic about what I'm bringing to the table, and I'm not looking for people to decide whether they think it's valuable or not, right? I know that I have something to offer. I know that my community has something to offer, and we need more spaces where we can find a venue and a space and a community in Atlanta where we can say, come on in and let's talk about the future. I think we need more conversations about the future of tech and more opportunities to plug people in and introduce them to the tech. And that will really create a space for people to consider how their personal ideas, their creativity, their small businesses can use this technology to support their business, their services, their stories, their history. But to get started, you have to have a willingness to try something new. You have to have an openness to see what's in it for you. You know, I too also didn't trust technology at some point in my life, and still have concerns about a lot of technology being put out where people are signing away their right to arbitration. Why would you have to do that to experience someone else's technology? You know, so there are a lot of pros and cons, much like every industry. But I think we have to be willing to be exposed in this space and have the aha moments. That's what we need, is more opportunities to plug in and be fascinated with how we can use this technology.
I think in the minority communities, we have two problems. The first problem is there are people who just don't have the resources
Mm.
to get access.
Yeah.
The second problem is those who may have access don't deem it as important.
Mm.
Do you have any suggestions on how we could try to break down those barriers?
Yeah, I see a long-term vision where um, a lot of the amazing people, let's just start with Atlanta. There's a lot of amazing Black women in this space, Black men, diverse people of diverse backgrounds in this space. It would really be great to kind of bring people together and really talk about what they're doing in each of these spaces and how we can all kind of create a council that acknowledges that our communities, regardless of their income, regardless of single parent or two-parent households, regardless of employed or not, that they all stand to benefit from this technology. And since it's been put in our hands, or we just grabbed it and now it's in our hands, um, we need to make a commitment to ensuring that people of all backgrounds get the opportunity to have this exposure. I see a lot of individual silos where everybody's kind of working on their own, and I'd really like to see more of a council created that kind of determines and dictates what are the positive uses of this technology and what are the uses of technology that will not serve our communities or humanity in a positive way, and be open to that. It makes it really hard because a lot of us in this space, we get less than 0.5% of a lot of the investment dollars out there. And a lot of us have amazing vision and a blueprint that can really expand what the future looks like. And we're still looking for funding. We're looking for support. We're looking for contracts. We're looking for opportunities to demonstrate and share what we're doing. But the opportunity to work together is something that we need to be more excited about, because only great things can come from us working together and deciding how we feel this could advance our communities. So I'm looking for that active foresight for how I can learn from those that came before me, how I can reach my hand out to those who are coming behind me, and make sure that we're all pulling each other forward into this future. I have a lot of hopes for what that looks like. Queens and kings in tech here in Atlanta, and what are all I look forward to looking at the culture and heritage community and saying, what are all the stories and music in the history that needs to be preserved? Like, let's catalog that now. And let's use a lot of these different organizations in tech in Atlanta to support that vision and create more partnerships and more collaborations, because we really can be an example. This city can be an example to many other cities about what it means for people of color to be in this space and to be building an inclusive future in tech. And we have that opportunity in Atlanta.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Please talk about your latest professional project.
Absolutely. My first project, I created a music history prototype that allows us to experience that history. Like I stated earlier, you can walk through this neighborhood, you can hear storytellers, you can listen to oral history and interact with avatars and 3D models of people. You can see the environment and hear the history of the landmarks and learn about the historic jazz clubs. And some of that history includes amazing musicians that I listed earlier, those global legacies. And that project is near and dear to my heart. And it actually is creating the opportunity to show other cities what I can do for them as well. So I'm looking to work with mayors in other cities that want to have a story, whether they're using it for tourism or education or in museums. Every city needs an immersive story that documents their history. And then outside of that, I'm working with school districts to offer classes that are introductions to immersive technology. Let's get everybody on equal playing field. Let's get you introduced first. And then also provide a diverse speaker series where we have speakers from all over the world sharing their story, not just what they do, but their actual story. Like today, I'm getting the chance to share with you what's important to me, where I came from. And that's not something that people often get the chance to talk about in tech. And I felt like that's something that's really important. So I'm interviewing people from all over the world in the XR space, and they're telling their story, where they were born, where they come from, what their community was like, how they ended up finding tech, what it means to them now, and what they're doing, and using that as inspiration for a lot of youth who come from the same places as us, but they look at, someone in this space and assume that they didn't have to work hard, or they assume, well, they're not from where I'm from, and maybe I don't have a role to play in this technology. And that's far from the truth, right? So the speaker series really gives people an opportunity to connect with people that are like-minded, that look like them, and really hear how their story unfolded, so that it gives them an opportunity to consider how their story can unfold. And then we're working with small businesses to build marketplaces for Black businesses in different cities. And that gives you an opportunity to walk into their business and experience, their story, their connection to whatever neighborhood they're in, and what their services and products are.
Amazing. Amazing. How did you become part of the edtech community?
I think, I have a lot of love for education and academia. My mother is from Trinidad. Both of my mother and father were college educated. When we were growing up, we didn't have a choice. We were told you're going to college. And I think that had a really profound impact on me, because I knew that mentally that I was going to have to think about how my life purpose was going to shape the future of this world. And that's what I was told. You're not just going to college to get a degree to go work for someone. You're going to use the information that you're getting to impact the world. And so education is near and dear. And what other place do you want to experience history? Like, yes, as an adult, you can do it. Yes, as an individual at home, you can do it. A grandparent or an elder may want to re-experience the very history that they lived. That's a reintroduction. But if we want to introduce future generations to history, what better way than to do it through education? And I think that that's something that we can be a lot more focused on. So like I said, it's great to see what Miss Morris is doing at Morehouse in education, and what that's affording students, and how that is going to impact and inspire students. So I'm curious to see where the next generation is going to take it when she passes the baton onto her predecessor. But it's really important to consider how XR can promote pride and self-awareness and inspiration and innovation just through education.
Thank you so much for that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you concerned with some of the pushback for that's going on across the country in regards to people being upset about cultural heritage being shared in different spaces in education?
Oh, that's a shame. And all the more reason why we need the exposure. It needs to be normalized. I'm going to share my personal perspective here. And I'm going to say that some of those opposing opinions are also okay with, history being taught in a way where we're calling Native Americans savages, or we're saying that the only Black history there is slavery, or referring to, different cultures in a derogatory way. History has been written one way for a very long time, and it has disrupted our opportunities to engage with one another and work with one another and value each other. And so people who oppose diverse thinking, diverse perspectives, aren't really willing to value who other people are and where they come from, because they're really headstrong and set in one particular way of thinking that identifies them in a position of power and others around them being oppressed. And if they are convinced that that's the way the world should work, then of course they're going to be opposed to new perspectives and cultures and heritage being involved in the future. But the reality of it is that we need to tell the correct story. We need to correct what's been miseducation for quite some time. And, it's not just Black history, it's history. And so we need to normalize sharing that history in different avenues and venues and industries. And it's challenging and difficult for me to hear because I was in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for quite some time. I worked with organizational leadership in helping them determine what it meant to define an inclusive workplace culture, recruitment, and leadership. And people are completely unaware of how their choices and decisions and biases are affecting them on a daily basis. So there really needs to be a step before people share their opinion. You know what I mean, Tony? Like before you open your mouth, are you willing to check yourself and acknowledge where your perspective has been shaped, how your environment and exposure has either, catapulted or limited and hindered your ability to see the world as it is? I think something about social media has allowed us to kind of feel like our opinions are so important that we can't go a day without posting 6 or 7 times what our opinion is. But there's not enough ambition and education. Like, what do I need to learn before I can share my opinion? And how am I using my thoughts and perspectives to weaponize and mobilize incorrect history, right? And instead look at how open am I to the truth and what's really been happening and how certain systems have continuously oppressed other people and kept them away from the truth of their culture or their heritage or their perspective. Yes, there are going to be a lot of people that are afraid of the future. But the truth is, we're just becoming more diverse. And there's groups of people that have a hard time accepting that. But we still need solutions that house accurate history that represents who we really are and what we have to offer. And we need people to be willing to assess where their inabilities to see the value in that comes from, and to often listen more and be willing to accept that they need to play a role in portraying true history and making that accessible and giving other cultures the opportunity to share their history. Like, I think for how many years history books have called Native Americans savages and barbarians. But if we let the Native Americans tell their own stories, that would be a very different story than what a lot of people are reading in books. So every culture, every group needs an opportunity to share their story and not be told what their story is. And I recognize that some people are going to have a hard time swallowing that. Between you and me and anyone listening, I call them dinosaurs because they will soon be extinct.
Thank you so much for that. We have a question from Joy. This is a marriage of two seemingly dissimilar spaces / cultures, sectors. For your next thing, what are the questions that you are asking?
I did a demo recently in Seattle, and the questions I asked are ones that I was told are never asked in tech. And that was, how does this make you feel? Like, what are your thoughts about this? How does it make you feel to experience your history and the legacy for which you come from? It makes us so proud to hear it. Anytime an elder is telling you about your history, that gives you a sense of pride. Now that you can experience it and interact with it, how does that make you feel? Right. I know that's not a standard question in tech, but I don't do things the way I think others do in tech. I really am focused on how can we expand our human story. So we're starting with Seattle. We're collecting all of that history, but our 10-year vision is to be the leader in this space. People want culture and music experiences because it really has an incredible power to yield and inspire and entertain and educate and experience living history. And I really believe that we can change the world just by leaving something spectacular behind. So moving forward, we're going to focus on another city, Atlanta. What stories do we need to tell? What history do we need to collect? How do we want to make that accessible to people here? And what other communities need this? Does Motown need to be preserved? The history of Harlem needs to be preserved. You know, California is experiencing gentrification in Oakland, and they have paved over so many places in Oakland. What history, what stories, what contribution, what human story needs to be told in that space? So we're just going to keep going.
Amazing. And I hate to ask this question because it means that we're getting near the end. What's next for Ms. Burton?
I would say doing more of the work that we're doing, introducing more classrooms, finding ways to have the XR community in Atlanta collaborate, creating more events for storytelling so that we can hear history from those who have lived it. Let's honor the living history in the cities that we live in. Let's collect the stories. Let's make them accessible. And I would say my future involves a lot of amazing fundraising where investors and people see the value of what we're bringing and are excited to sign that check and be a part of this mission and support its reach for various communities. So I'm excited about the fundraising journey. I'm excited about opening a new lane for immersive storytelling and XR preservation. I'm excited about creating a pipeline for youth to see their future in this space and not make them wait until they graduate from college to be involved in it. I'm excited about access, and everything I do will be to promote access.
Speaking of access, have you thought about possibly having the space in a public library where
Absolutely.
students can come in and use the headset?
Absolutely. In fact, when we were in Seattle doing the demo last week, we used a historically Black library to share it. Tony, I don't know when the last time you saw a line at the library was, but we had that. We had a line at the library to come and get plugged in. I see a lot of opportunities for how we can work with those who are protecting, preserving, and honoring history. And I'm really interested in working with the Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta and creating immersive interactive exhibits so people can come in to a space like the Civil Rights Museum and experience that history.
So that reminds me of I haven't had a chance to check on this lately, but at one time the Smithsonian was doing a lot of interactive online activity and a lot of virtual spaces. Are there other museums and other cities that are participating in what you're doing?
Well, the goal is to work with all the museums, right? I mean, as you know, they need new innovative things coming in to keep customers coming in the door. And you saw what Van Gogh did, the traveling Van Gogh exhibit or Meow Wolf. I mean, this was projecting Van Gogh images on a wall, and it gave people an opportunity to come in and experience an immersive like exhibit in a social way where you don't need a headset. We have a roadmap for museums to do a lot more work of this, and I'm excited about that future.
Fantastic. You're speaking to the world. What do you want them to know?
Oh, I see. I would say I want you all to know that we dictate what the future looks like. It doesn't have to just be handed to us. We can build it. We don't need permission to do that. And, you know, everyone's looking at what's happening with VR, what's happening with AR, and everybody's kind of standing by waiting to see what's going to happen. Our contribution and our voice and our perspective is going to dictate the future of this technology. And like I said, we have the most to gain from it. They took it as far as they could, right? Games. And that's awesome. But we have the power to take it so much further. And we need the opportunity for diverse communities to be captivated by this technology. So plug in and, you know, determine how your past can help dictate the future for someone else. And let's create a new human story of positive, conscious tech that moves us into a space where we are all valued, seen, heard, and mobilized. I'm
Thank you
excited about
so
the
much.
future.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And I'm just going to add, I'm running out of time, but I do want to add this too. Consider churches sharing their virtual experiences of how
Yeah.
they, you know, that's part of our history and culture as well.
Yeah.
And so there are some legacies that can be shared as far as houses of worship. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Miss Yolanda Burton, for being here with me today. What a great conversation. We're definitely going to have you back. And thank you again so much. Uh, you can watch this conversation on YouTube and on Conversation with Tony Mobley. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by valued audio visual professionals who meet daily on Office Hours Global, hosted by Alex Lindsay. Thank you, Z98 FM, LinkedIn Live, and YouTube. Conversations with real people. Last week, we had a great conversation with Mr. Peter Wilson, Doctor of Music of Arts, a 30-year veteran of the Presidential Band. When you have time, we ask that you go back and look at the 90 plus, and you heard me,
Yeah.
90 plus episodes of Conversation with Tony Mobley. I think you will like, I think you will find something that you like, and hopefully something that is helpful. Conversations with Tony Mobley can be heard on 98.1fm.com. Our radio audience in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thank you, Taylor Sunderhouse and the team behind Conversation with Tony Mobley for making this happen. Thank you, Yolanda Burton, for our conversation today, for doing the work you do, and for being the person that you are.
Thank you.
Next week, Conversations with Tony Mobley will have Mr. Lee Michaels of iRadio Coach. And thank you all so much. Good night. Take care. God bless. See you soon.
Thank you.